Everyone, it's Jessie G here. Welcome back to Jessie's Hangout. Welcome. This is episode number 15. Today's episode is all about King Henry VIII, which his full name is Henry Rex Tudor. This is all about him. This will possibly be in 3, maybe 4 parts. We'll see how far I get with the first 2 parts and see what's what. As you guys know, you guys seen the copyright disclaimer, the age warning, and the trigger and sensitive warning, so I'm going to go ahead and give it again. Hopefully, with both of these 2 warnings going out twice, hopefully you guys will take these into consideration. These are put there for your guys' safety and for my safety for my videos, for me as a creator, just being responsible. So with all of that said, let's get into it. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news report, teaching, scholarships, research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be interfering nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So with that said, the age warning, if you're under the age of 18, again, this is not an episode for you guys to listen to. Sorry, but it really isn't. Even though this is a history episode and everything, there's still some sensitive subjects that are probably just not good for 18 and under. Sorry, but that's just how these episodes work. Also, if you're sensitive or triggered by any of the topics talked about in today's episode, I highly recommend that you don't listen to today's episode. If you do choose to listen to today's episode at your own discretion, I highly recommend you listen to it with somebody, your emotional support system, or somebody that you love and trust enough to sit down and just listen to these episodes with you and be there with you in case if any of these happen to be too sensitive for you or too triggering at some point or another. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I hope you guys took in all those warnings. I hope you guys took everything into consideration. Let's get into it. Henry Rex Tudor was born to King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York on the 28th of June, 1491. Henry had 3 other siblings, Arthur, Margaret, and Mary Tudor. But Henry's mother had 2 stillborn children, but Elizabeth, Henry's sister, died at age 3, and Edmund Tudor died just shortly after birth. On April 1502, Henry's elder brother and first son to Henry VII died at age 15, just shortly after being married to Catherine of Aragon, but soon on the 11th of February, 1503, just a few days after giving birth to Henry's sister, Catherine Tudor, who died on the 2nd of February when she was born. Elizabeth of York died of childbirth infection, and later into Henry's childhood, his father, King Henry VII, died at Richmond Palace at the age of 52 in 1509 on April the 2nd. Henry was now the heir to his father's throne. On June the 11th, 1509, Henry married his elder brother's widow after she had just only had been a widow for 7 years. She was a widow for 7 years. That's long. On the 24th of June at Westminster Abbey, King Henry VIII was crowned King of England alongside his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, who was also crowned Queen of England. But Catherine had given birth 6 times to stillborn sons and 1 daughter. But on the 18th of February, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby girl who has been known. She was called Bloody Mary. She was the only living child out of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon's marriage. Her name was Mary Tudor, which is Mary the First of England. It was not an heir that Henry had wanted, but Catherine gave birth to a son. Catherine had given birth to a son, but he only was alive for 52 days. I'm not really totally 100% really sure exactly what had happened. I don't know if it was due to him being born and something happened. I'm not really sure exactly what it was, but it was really sad that he didn't last that long. It was really rough on Henry and Catherine's marriage when that happened. It was rough when she went through what she went through, the humiliation of not giving him a son, the humiliation of giving birth 6 times to stillborn sons and 1 daughter that didn't make it, and then to only have a son that lasted 52 days and then given birth to finally your only survival living healthy child out of the whole marriage, Mary the First of England, which was really sad to say that was what came out of their 24-year marriage. Catherine was his longest marriage. He was married to Catherine longer than his other wives. He was married to Catherine for 24 years. He was married to Anne Boleyn for 3. He was married to Jane Seymour, I think not even a year yet. And then Catherine Howard, I'm sure it was only a couple of months, I would imagine. I'm sure it really wasn't that long. And then Anne of Cleves definitely wasn't that long. I'm pretty sure it was maybe 6 months maybe, or not even that. And then Catherine Parr, he wasn't really married to her that long either. So that's pretty big for somebody to be married 6 times, and out of the 6 marriages, his and Catherine's marriage was longer than the other ones were. So that's pretty sad. Henry was still desperate for a male heir. Henry took a mistress named Elizabeth Blunt, who later gave birth to a son on the 15th of June, 1591. Henry had longed for a son and heir, but despite Henry having a son, he was also convinced around this time he was beguiled and obsessed and totally taken by Anne Boleyn and who she was as a person around that time. You know, he kind of did a lot of things for her, but I think it was more or less for him in a way. He was so beguiled in it, and Anne refusing him as in being his mistress. She refused to be his mistress. She refused to be with any man in that way until she was married. And then that's what later led into Henry questioning his 24-year marriage to Catherine. I'll get a little bit into that discussion. He was convinced the marriage to Catherine of Aragon was not a legal marriage, and he still proceeded to have it annulled because he believed Catherine's marriage to his elder brother was consummated. Henry set his eyes on Anne Boleyn, but Anne refused to be his mistress. She was a lady in waiting to his first wife, Catherine. Henry's love for Anne, and he wrote a series of love letters, but still refused Henry. And then sometime in that year, in 1527, Henry asked Anne to marry him, and she sent him a gift acknowledging that she said yes. She had agreed to not only marry him, but be under his protection. She fully agreed, body and soul, to be his wife and to be put under his protection. Um, uh, let's see. This engagement lasted like 7 years. It was a 7-year betrothal. Um, Due to there was reasons for the 7-year betrothal, which I will also get into this discussion, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a hint into it, it had to do with a lot with Catherine and Henry's divorce. It had a lot to do with him fighting the Pope and the Vatican and canon law and trying to be the head of the churches of England. He was fighting a lot of that, and it was a 7-year long hell, so to speak. In 1533, on the 25th of January, Anne married Henry in secret, and she was with child. Sometime before that, on June the 1st, 1533, Anne was crowned Queen of England, and 3 months later, on September the 7th, 1533, Anne gave birth to Henry's only child, a daughter, Elizabeth Tudor, Elizabeth I. She was the one that outlived her whole entire family. She reigned for 47 years. Her reign was the golden age. I'm going to do an episode on her soon, so stay tuned for that. That will be very interesting, to say the least. It wasn't a son that she had promised, but desperate for it being a son and an heir. Henry gave Elizabeth a splendid christening, and basically gave her legitimizing her their offsprings, or basically their heirs to the throne. Whatever kids that they had would be in line to the throne, whether it was a male or female, they would be in line for the throne. And it was also called an act of succession. And also during that time, Catherine of Aragon was stripped of her titles as queen, and Mary declared illegitimate. She was basically knocked off, or have lost her rights of ever being considered on the throne, or even being acknowledged as Henry's daughter, which was really sad. Henry and Anne's issue would be declared next in line to the throne with that, which I was mentioning, was the Act of Succession in 1533, but some refused to take the oath. Sir Thomas More, who was his Chancellor of England after Wolsey took his own life, he was put in the Tower due to abusing his office, his power, and for stealing from the king and doing things that you shouldn't do. He did it. Bishop Fitcher, who was said to, I don't know, this was in the Tudors, but I'm not really 100%. And like I said, I'll talk more about it too. It was said before he died, he was given the title Cardinal by the Pope. His hat was supposed to be sent to him, and he was given the title Cardinal Fisher. So they were executed for treason. On July 1534, Anne miscarried a son and heir, and Henry started to lose his interest in Anne and didn't see what Anne could give him. She didn't see Anne giving him a son, and saw her future as a betrayal. And in the early Christmas, Henry had discussed with Cromwell, I'm not really sure if this is actually really true, but he actually had discussed with Cromwell about the marriage between him and Catherine, or him and Anne, sorry. And mind you, Cromwell was really kind of dead set in his own ways. He kind of had his own personal vendettas. He was kind of he kind of basically did what Anne did, and I think this is one of the things that orchestrated her downfall, and I don't think it was the charges of adultery or incest that did it. I think it was her setting herself too high and meddling in things that she shouldn't have, and basically kind of doing what Cromwell did, but the opposite. And I think that's also what spiraled his downfall, and it didn't help that he really didn't force upon Henry to marry Anne of Cleves, but that marriage was also brought up, so that led to a lot of other downfalls, which I'll talk more about that too. During that time, news spread that, or news came to Anne and Henry that Catherine had passed away. Catherine had passed away. I think it was due to some sort of disease. I'm not really sure, but it reached Henry VIII and Anne, and Anne and Henry were overjoyed by hearing her death. Henry and Anne celebrated Catherine's death. Henry and Anne wore yellow, mourning colors of Catherine. Instead of your traditional black that you would normally wear for a mourning funeral, but in Spain back in that time it was yellow. So there you have it. But a lot of people still wore black though, but for her it was yellow. And Anne was with child at that time too once more, but sadly she failed to give him a son, and a few days later, after just carrying Henry's son for as long as she did, Anne miscarried again on the 29th of January 1536, and Henry had his eyes set on the Lady Jane Seymour. This was when Henry had started to realize that his marriage to Anne was, he was seduced by witchcraft. He was basically set up and basically accused her of committing adultery and incest, and accused her of being a witch and everything. And she was sent to the Tower on the 2nd of May. And then on the 19th of May, 1536 is when Anne was executed. And then about 10 or 12 days later, he married Jane Seymour. When she was executed, her daughter was also declared illegitimate. I can't really say the word, but she was basically lost her place in line for the throne. Basically, she wasn't recognized as Henry's daughter. And then Jane Seymour gave birth to a son on October the 12th, 1537. It was a 3-day labor that she was in. It was a very rough birth. They had to do what we call C-section to get the baby out, and because of that, infection set in, a fever set in, and on October the 24th, 1537, Jane Seymour passed away of infection. And after Jane's death, he was so saddened and grief-stricken by her death and by what happened, and everything, that he was in his room for like 3 days straight. He never came out of his room. He never really said anything. He was just in there by himself completely, basically. And it was a 3-year mourning that he went into, even though despite being in his room for 3 days. So after 3 years of mourning for Jane, in 1540, Henry desired to marry Anne of Cleves, but sadly he was misinformed about Anne of Cleves, and he said that she looked like a horse, and that she really wasn't good looking, and he said a lot of other mean things that you would normally never say to a woman unless you really want to get slapped in the face. But anyways, I will continue the second part of Henry VIII and hopefully more of the discussion on Henry VIII. I hope you guys enjoyed the first part. I'll continue with the second part of this. If you guys haven't already, hit that red subscribe button and that notification so you'll be notified as to when I upload future episodes and any other videos on this channel. Also, if you wish to stay even more up to date and get even more notified, go check out the description box below this episode. I have every one of my social media is listed in the description box. Go follow me on all of those. I hope you guys have an awesome afternoon, morning, day, or night, wherever you're watching this from. And I will catch you in the second part of this. Laters.